welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Blue Parasite, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Camilo Sebra stepped off the ship and onto Brazilian soil after 8 long years in Europe. He had left Goiás as a young man chasing his dreams, and now he returned to Rio de Janeiro with a medical degree tucked away and a heart full of mixed feelings. The city hadn't changed much, or maybe it had, but Camilo wasn't sure. All he knew was that something inside him felt off. He looked around with tired eyes as the city unfolded before him, piece by piece, while the ship made its way toward the harbor. His face showed no joy, only a quiet sadness, like someone hiding a secret wound. When the moment came to leave the boat, he did so without excitement, like a prisoner leaving one cage for another. As the small boat pulled away from the ship, Camilo caught sight of the tricolor flag fluttering in the wind. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "Goodbye, France." Then he wrapped himself in silence and let the boat carry him forward. Rio was alive and noisy, just as he remembered. But instead of feeling happy or proud, he felt lost. He tried to compare this moment with the life he had built overseas, with all its lights and colors. That life now felt far away, like a dream slipping through his fingers. It hurt more than he expected. He checked into the first hotel that seemed decent enough. He needed time to rest, to think, to decide what came next. Goiás waited for him, but not yet. For now, Rio would have to do. Camilo dined alone, his heart heavy and his mind crowded with 1,000 memories of the world he had just left behind. To give his sorrow even more room to breathe, as soon as dinner ended, he stretched out on the couch and began silently listing the chain of cruel misfortunes that had shaped his life. In his eyes, no man had ever suffered so deeply under the weight of fate. There was nothing in the Christian martyrology, nor in the Greek tragedies, nor even in the book of Job that could match the bitterness of his pain. Let's take a closer look at some of the saddest moments in our hero's life. He was born into wealth, the only son of a landowner from Goiás who never once left his home province. In 1828, a French naturalist visited the region. The two became friends, and their bond grew so strong that the landowner asked the scientist to be his son's godfather. At the time, the boy was barely 1 year old. The naturalist, though better known for his scientific work, had tried his hand at poetry years earlier. Back in 1810, his verses had earned some praise, but like so many forgotten poems, they were swept away by time, the old thief of eternity. The former poet forgave the world everything, except the fact that people no longer remembered a certain poem he had written about the life of furious Camillus. He still read it with deep passion, and as a tribute to that youthful creation, he gave the boy the name Camilo. The priest Machado baptized him with that name, much to the joy of the whole family and their friends. Sebra, the proud father, turned to the naturalist during the ceremony and said, "Godfather, if this boy grows up strong, I'll send him to your country to study medicine or any other subject that makes a man of value. And if you see in him a talent for plants or minerals, like yours, don't hold back, give him whatever path you think best, as if he were your own son. In spirit you are. Who knows if he'll even be alive by then?" The naturalist replied. "Oh, you'll live," Zebra insisted. "This body doesn't lie. You've got iron in your blood." Camilo walked through the fields every day, under sun or rain, never even a small headache. I would have been dead by now with half his work. He must live and take care of my boy until the young man finishes his studies here. Zebra kept his promise, exactly as he said. Camilo left for Paris soon after everything was arranged, and there his godfather took care of him like a real father. The rich man spent without limits to make sure Camilo had everything he needed. The monthly allowance sent to him could easily support 2 or 3 people in the same situation. Besides that money, during Easter and Christmas, Camilo received special gifts from his mother's small treats that came in the form of generous 500-franc bills. Until then, the only problem in Camilo's life was his godfather, who followed him closely, always afraid the young man might fall into trouble in such a big city. But good luck finally arrived when the old poet from 1810 passed away peacefully, joining his forgotten writings in silence, leaving behind just a few marks of his time in the world of knowledge. Camilo quickly wrote a letter to his father, full of deep thoughts. Near the end, he wrote, "To sum it up, dear father, if you believe I have enough sense to finish my education here, and if you trust that the spirit of our late friend will guide me toward wisdom and truth, please let me stay until I can return home as an educated man, ready to serve my country with honor as I should. But if you do not agree with my request, tell me honestly, because I won't stay another moment in this land that once felt like home, and now, oh, sorrow, feels only like exile." The old man wasn't the kind of person who could read between the lines of this emotional letter and understand the real feelings behind it. He cried with joy when he read his son's words, showed the letter to all his friends, and hurried to reply. He told Camilo he could stay in Paris for as long as needed to finish his studies. He also promised that beyond the monthly allowance already given, he would never refuse any extra money Camilo might need in case of unexpected situations. Moreover, he sincerely supported the feelings Camilo had expressed about his homeland and the memory of his godfather. The father sent greetings from Uncle Jorge, Father Machiel, Colonel Vega, and many other relatives and friends, and ended the letter by giving his blessing. Camilo received his father's letter during lunch at Café de Madrid, where he was entertaining 2 or 3 top-class troublemakers. He had expected the reply, but couldn't resist raising a toast to his father's health, a gesture his stylish friends were happy to follow. That very day, Camilo started planning some unexpected expenses from his father's point of view. The next mail brought back to Brazil a long letter. In it, Camilo thanked his father for his kind words, told him how much he missed him, shared his hopes for the future, and politely asked almost as an afterthought in a postscript for a small sum of money. Thanks to these privileges, Camilo began living a more relaxed and expensive life. But not too much. He still kept up with his studies. His intelligence and the pride he still carried helped him a lot. When he finished his degree, he passed his exams and earned his doctorate. He immediately wrote home to share the good news and asked for permission to travel across Europe. His father said yes, and Camilo left Paris to visit Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and England. Several months later, Camilo found himself back in the bustling capital city. There, he picked up where he had left off, resuming his old life with a fresh start, and free from the worries that once troubled him. The young man dove headfirst into every kind of pleasure imaginable: parties, Dinners, late nights with such urgency it almost seemed reckless. He had many friends, all eager and loyal, ready to lend him money without hesitation. Among the women of Rio de Janeiro, especially those who lived freely and boldly, Camilo was a favorite. Many had loved him intensely, even obsessively. No famous ball happened without him, no horse race, no fancy dinner or outing was complete without his presence. Everyone called him cet aimable Brazilian, the charming Brazilian. Back home in Goiás, his father, a respected man known as the Comendador, missed him deeply and wrote urging him to return to Brazil. But Camilo, now fully Parisian at heart, couldn't imagine leaving the intellectual heart of France to live in a small town far inland. He replied politely but vaguely, avoiding any clear promise, and stayed put. The old man chose not to push too hard at first. But after some time, he tried again, asking Camilo to come back. Again, Camilo gave excuses. This time, the Comendador grew angry. In his third letter, he didn't ask any more, he scolded harshly. This finally shook Camilo. With a heavy heart, he prepared to return to his homeland. Still, he held on to a quiet hope. Maybe one day he could go back to Paris for good. To spend his final years strolling along the Boulevard des Italiens, or sitting outside the Café Helder. But just as he made plans to leave, something unexpected delayed his trip. Camilo, who until then had only known short affairs and fleeting romances, suddenly fell deeply in love with a beautiful Russian princess. Don't be fooled by the title. Rumor had it, and some people were certain that this so-called princess had actually grown up on Rua du Bode and worked at a dressmaker's shop before the revolution of 1848, during the chaos of those years. She caught the eye of a Polish major who took her to Warsaw. When she returned, she came back, transformed now, dressed like royalty, speaking French with an accent, and bearing a noble name that ended in either ein or off. No one could quite remember which. Camilo lived a life full of mystery, making fun of all her admirers except Camilo himself, she said. Of him she claimed to feel something so strong that she could even stop wearing the black clothes of a widow. But just as quickly, she would take those words back, raising her eyes to heaven and crying out, "Oh no! Never, dear Alexis, never will I disgrace your memory by joining myself to another man." These were cruel knives stabbing straight into Camilo's heart. The young doctor swore on every saint in both the Latin and Greek calendars that he had never loved anyone as deeply as he loved the beautiful princess. At times, the cold-hearted lady seemed ready to believe Camilo's promises. Other times, though, she would shake her head sadly and ask forgiveness from the spirit of the noble Prince Alexis. In the middle of this confusion, a final letter arrived from the commander. The old man from Goiás gave his son one last warning: return home immediately, or risk losing all financial support and even being locked out of the family house. There was no way to delay any longer. Camilo tried thinking of a serious illness as an excuse, but the thought that his father might not believe it and cut him off completely made him abandon that idea entirely. He didn't even have the strength to go tell the lovely princess about his situation. Worse still, he feared she might act out of sudden generosity, the kind that comes from someone who truly loves and offer to share with him her lands in Novgorod. To accept them would be shameful. To refuse them might seem insulting. So Camilo chose instead to leave Paris quietly, leaving behind a simple letter for the princess. In it, he told her honestly what had happened and promised that one day he would return. These were the heavy troubles that fate had placed upon Camilo's soul. As he traveled, he kept going over each sorrow in his mind, until he heard the clock strike 8 at night. He stepped outside for some fresh air, and with every breath, his longing for Paris only grew stronger. Everything around him felt dark, narrow, and small. He looked down on all the shops along Rua do Ouvidor, with the cold judgment of a man who saw nothing but a long, overly lit alleyway, nothing more than a poor imitation of the city he loved. Camilo thought the men were awkward and the women ungraceful. It reminded him, though, that Santa Luzia, his hometown, was even less like Paris than Rio de Janeiro. Feeling defeated by this annoying thought, he hurried back to his hotel and went to bed. The next day, right after lunch, he visited his father's business partner in the city. He told the man he planned to leave for Goiás in 4 or 5 days. The partner gave him the money he needed, as the comendador had already arranged. He also said he was ready to help with anything else, if Camilo ever wanted to stay a few weeks in the capital. "No," Camilo replied. "Nothing is keeping me in the capital, and am eager to start my trip." "I imagine you must miss home," the man said. "How many years has it been?" 8. 8? That's quite a long time. Camilo got ready to leave when a tall, thin man walked into the room. He had some beard under his chin and a mustache, wore a brown cotton jacket, and held a Chilean-style hat in his hand. The man looked at Camilo, stopped in his tracks, took a step back, and after a moment of hesitation, said out loud, "Am not mistaken. It's Mr. Camilo." "Yes," answered Camilo Cibra, the commandator's son, giving the house owner a questioning look. "This gentleman," said the business partner, "is Mr. Soares, son of the merchant from Santa Luzia." "What?" Camilo said. "Are you Leandro, the one who only had a mustache back then?" "In the flesh," Soares interrupted. "Same Leandro, now with a full beard just like you, who also grew yourself a fine mustache. I wouldn't have recognized you. But I recognized you the moment I saw you, even though you've changed a lot. You've turned into a fine young man." "Me? I've gotten old." 26 already. "Don't laugh in telling you I'm old." "When did you arrive?" "Yesterday." "And when are you leaving for Goiás?" "I'm waiting for the first steamer from Santos." Camilo and Soares met by chance in the small town where they both had business. At first they only exchanged polite greetings, but soon their conversation grew warmer. "Not on purpose. We'll go together," Camilo said with a smile. Soares lit up at the idea. "How is your father? And everyone else back home? What about Father Michiel? And Vega? Tell me everything." Camilo laughed. "We have time to talk more later. For now, I'll just say that everyone is fine. Only Father Michiel fell ill 2 months ago with a bad fever. People thought he wouldn't make it, but he did. Let's hope he stays well now, especially since we're preparing for the Holy Spirit feast." Soares leaned closer. "Curious. Are you still holding those festivals?" Camilo nodded. "Of course. This year, Colonel Vega is the emperor of the event. He says he wants to do things right, with style. He even promised a ball. But we can talk more about this here on the road. Where are you staying?" Camilo told him about the hotel where he was living, and after saying goodbye, he felt happy to have found someone to share the long trip with. Soares walked out to the door and watched Camilo leave, until he could no longer see him. He turned to his friend who had come to join him. "Look what happens when a man travels through foreign lands," he said. "Just look at that young man, he used to be almost like me." Chapter 2. They headed inland to Goiás. A few days later, the two men left for Santos, then traveled inland to São Paulo, and finally took the road toward Goiás. As Soares slowly regained the closeness he once had with the commissioner's son, he began to share stories from his life over the past 8 years. Without anything better to do, these tales kept the doctor entertained during moments and in places where nature offered no interesting sights. After traveling a few leagues, Camilo already knew all about Soares' election fights, his hunting adventures, his love conquests, and many other stories, some serious, others silly, all told by Soares with equal excitement and passion. Camilo wasn't a very observant man, but Soares' soul was so clearly exposed that it was impossible not to see and study it. He didn't think Soares was a bad guy, but he noticed a certain bravado in every aspect of his life: politics, hunting, gambling, and even love. In the love stories, there was one serious tale. Soares spoke of a young woman he claimed to love deeply, so much so that he would destroy anyone who dared to look at her. "In telling you this, Camilo," confessed Soares, the merchant's son, "if anyone dares to try and win that girl, he can count on 2 unhappy men in the world, him and me. But I don't think it will come to that. Everyone there knows me. They know I don't joke when I say something. Just a few months ago, Major Valente lost the election simply because he said he would get the municipal judge fired. He didn't fire him, and as punishment, he got a beating. He ended up on the list of substitutes. I was the one who gave him the beating. That's how it went." "But why don't you marry that girl?" Camilo asked carefully, trying to shift the conversation away from Soares' latest election victory. "I don't marry her because do you really want to know why?" "Of course. Out of friendship, and nothing more." Camilo pulled his horse to a stop, the hooves crunching against the gravel. "You're not getting married because she doesn't want to?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. "Not want to?" Camilo repeated, surprised. "Then why is she trying to stop me from marrying someone else?" "That's a long story," the other man said, shaking his head. "It's about Isabel." "Isabel?" Camilo interrupted, sitting up straighter in the saddle. "Wait, though. You mean Isabel Matos, the daughter of Dr. Matos, who used to be a judge 10 years ago?" "The very same," the man replied. "She must be grown up now," Camilo said thoughtfully. "Oh yes, 20 years old, and then some," came the response. "She was pretty as a girl, remember? But now she's stunning. You can't walk past her without turning your head. She has turned down more than one proposal already. The last one was mine." Camilo looked over at him. "She turned you down?" "She did," the man admitted. "And she even told me why, face to face." "What reason could she give?" Camilo asked, curious. The man cleared his throat and tried to mimic her voice. "Look, Mr. Soares," she said, "you truly deserve a woman who would accept you as a husband. I could do it, am capable of that, but I want, because we'd never be happy together." He paused, letting the words sink in. That was all she said. Just that one sentence. "Did you talk after that?" Camilo asked. "Oh yes. Many times," Soares replied. "She didn't change toward me. She still treats me like before. But those words, they still hurt, deep inside. If it weren't for them, I might still have hope. But I know better now. It's useless. She doesn't love me." Camilo studied his friend for a moment. "Can I speak honestly?" "Of course." "You sound like a selfish man," Camilo said plainly. "I won't deny it," Soares admitted. "I am. I get jealous of everything, even the air she breathes. If I saw her fall for another man and couldn't stop their wedding, I'd leave town. But I, and everyone believes it too, that she'll never love anyone else." Camilo looked out toward the horizon, as if searching for something far away. "Maybe she just doesn't know how to love," he said softly. "Not everyone is born with that gift. It's rare, something only the finest hearts possess." Camilo sat by the fire, thinking about love and sacrifice. Some women, he believed, gave everything heart and soul to the people they loved. These women filled their lives with deep feelings and deserved to be adored forever. He knew they were rare, but they existed. He ended this quiet tribute to the woman in his thoughts with a long sigh, one that almost seemed to fly through the air like a message. It never reached her, but not because Camilo didn't mean it. His friend didn't understand what Camilo was trying to say. He kept insisting that the beautiful woman from Goiás didn't care for anyone, and even less would he allow Camilo to get close to her. Still, both men enjoyed talking about her. They kept the conversation going until the sun began to set. Not long after, they arrived at a small stop where they would spend the night. Once the animals were unloaded, the servants made coffee first, and then dinner. In moments like this, Camilo missed Paris even more. How different this simple meal was compared to the fancy dinners he used to enjoy at restaurants on the Champs-Élysées. Here, there were no French sauces or fine dishes, no copy of the Figaro or Gazette des Tribunaux to read while eating. Camilo sighed quietly to himself. He became even quieter than usual. But it didn't matter, he barely spoke anyway, and his companion talked enough for both of them. After dinner, Camilo lit a cigar and Soares lit a cheap straw cigarette. Night had fallen. The firelight illuminated only a small circle around them. But it wasn't really needed, since the moon had started to rise behind the hills. Pale and bright, it danced across the leaves and shimmered on the calm waters of the river winding nearby. One of the cowboys pulled out a viola and began singing a song. Its simple tune and lyrics might have charmed anyone else with its rustic charm. But for Camilo, all it did was remind him sadly of the elegant music of the Paris opera. Camilo sat alone beneath the night sky, which was truly beautiful and quiet. The air felt heavy with memories. He thought back to a moment in his past, this time in Moscow. He remembered how the lovely Russian girl sat lazily in a theater box at the Teatro dos Italianos. She had stopped listening to the singer's soft words just to look at Camilo from afar, gently smelling a small bunch of violets. Soares climbed into his hammock and fell asleep quickly. The cowboy stopped singing his song. Soon, all was quiet at the camp. Camilo stayed outside, thinking and watching the stars. He was not blind to beauty. In fact, he loved it. And since he had been away for so long, this simple view of nature felt almost new to him. It touched him deeply. From time to time, he heard distant cries. They sounded like wild animals wandering through the dark woods. Other times it was just night birds calling out their sad songs. Crickets, frogs, and toads filled the night with sounds, like a wild opera from the countryside. Camilo surely enjoyed it, even though he would have preferred a lighter, more cheerful show. He stayed like that for a long time, nearly 2 hours. His mind wandered through old thoughts and dreams. He built castles in the air, only to tear them down again. Suddenly, Soar's voice pulled him back. It seemed like he was trapped in a nightmare. Camilo listened closely and caught some broken, muffled words. Isabel, dear. Isabel, what is this? Ah, my God. Somebody help. The last words came out louder and full of fear. Camilo ran to his friend and shook him hard. Soars woke up in shock. He sat up, looked around and whispered, "What happened?" "A bad dream." "Yes, it was a nightmare." "Thank God. What time is it?" "It's still night." "Are you already awake?" "And just now going to sleep?" "Let's rest while we can. He'll tell you about the dream tomorrow." And true to his word, the very next morning, just after they walked the first 20 yards, Soars told Camilo every detail of his terrible dream from the night before. He looked at me for a moment, then began his story. "I was standing by the river," he said, "with my shotgun in hand, watching for capybaras. I happened to glance up at the opposite bank, which was high above me, and saw a young woman on a black horse. She wore all black, and her dark hair fell over her shoulders. Everything about her seemed dark and mysterious." "It was like a shadow," Camilo interrupted. "Wait," he continued. "I was surprised to see such a delicate girl alone in that place and in that way. Do you know who it was? Was it Isabel?" "Yes, Isabel. I ran along the shore, climbed onto a large rock across from where she stood, and asked what she was doing there. She didn't answer right away. Then, pointing down into the deep ravine below, she said, 'My hat fell down there.'" "Ah," I said. After a few minutes of silence, she suddenly asked, "Do you love me?" "Yes," I replied. "More than life itself." "Then will you do whatever I ask?" "All right," I said. "Anything." She smiled slightly. "Good. Go get my hat." I looked down. It was a huge, steep hole. At the bottom, muddy water rushed and roared. The hat had not floated away with the current but stayed stuck on the tip of a sharp rock. From below, it seemed to call out for me to come get it. But that was impossible. I looked around for some other way to help, but there was none. "Imagination can be dangerous," Camilo remarked. I was still trying to find words to talk her out of this terrible idea when I felt a hand land gently on my shoulder. I turned around. "It was a man, actually. It was you." "Me?" "Yes, sir." You looked at me with clear disapproval, smiled kindly at her, and then glanced down at the deep ravine. Suddenly, and without warning, you were already halfway down, reaching out your hand to grab the cursed little hat. Oh! But just then, the water rose quickly, threatening to pull you under. Hearing this, Isabel screamed in fear, kicked her horse hard, and jumped down the slope after you. I shouted as loud as I could. I screamed for help, but it was no use. The water had already wrapped around them in its folds when I was woken up by the gentleman. Leandro Soares ended his telling of this nightmare looking still shaken by what he had imagined. It's worth mentioning that he truly believed in dreams. See what a bad digestion can do, Camilo said when his fellow traveler finished speaking. What a pile of nonsense. The hat, the cliff, the horse, and most of all my own presence in this wild fantasies is all the work of someone who didn't digest dinner properly. In Paris there are theaters that put on nightmares like yours worse than yours, in fact, because they go on longer. But what I also see is that this girl won't leave you alone, not even in your sleep. Not even in my sleep. Soares repeated those two words almost like an echo, absent-mindedly. From the moment he finished his story, and especially after Camilo's first words, he had begun thinking deeply about something he never shared with anyone, including the author of this tale. All I can tell you is that these thoughts were not happy ones, because his head dropped low. His forehead wrinkled, and fixing his eyes on the donkey's ears, he fell into a silence so deep it could not be broken. From that day onward, the journey became harder for Camilo than it had been before. Besides the slight sadness that seemed to tick over his friend, the endless miles now felt more boring than ever. Eventually Soares returned to his usual talkative self, but by then, even he couldn't shake the terrible boredom that had taken hold of poor Camilo. Yet when he finally saw the city where the farm lay nearby the place where he had lived, the early days of his youth, Camilo felt his heart pound hard inside him. A serious feeling took control. For a while at least, Paris and all its splendor gave way to the small, honest land of the Sebras family. Chapter 3. Camilo's return was like a celebration for the whole town. When he stepped off the train, the commander, his father, wrapped him in a tight embrace. 8 years had passed since Camilo left for faraway lands, and now here he was, back home. The old man couldn't hold back his tears. They came straight from his heart, full of love and deep emotion. Camilo felt the same joy inside. He kissed his father's hands and forehead, hugged relatives and old friends, and for a few days, just a few, it seemed as if he had forgotten all about going back to Europe. People everywhere talked about only one thing: Camilo's return. He was not just a topic of conversation, he was the conversation. Everyone praised him. His manners, his style, his confidence, people couldn't get enough of it. Even the smallest thing he said felt special to those who listened. Father Machado, the priest who had baptized Camilo 27 years earlier, was perhaps the loudest voice among his admirers. Looking at the young man now, grown and successful, the priest told the commander proudly, "I must say, sir," Father Machado said with a smile, "you can truly be proud. Heaven has given you a fine young man. Santa Lucia will soon have a first-rate doctor, and sure of it. And not only that, he is also wise beyond his years. I tested his thinking yesterday, and I found no fault in him." Uncle Jorge walked around asking everyone what they thought of Camilo. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Vega gave thanks to God for bringing Deuter Camilo back just in time. "Without him," Vega said, "my ball would have been incomplete." And Deuter Matos was not the last to visit the commander's son either. He was an old man, tall and well-built, though slightly bent by age. "Come here, doctor," said old Zebra as soon as he saw him appear at the door. "Come see my boy." "My boy indeed," replied Matos, looking at the young man. "Is more of a man than I expected. It's been 8 years already. Come here, give me a hug." The young man opened his arms and embraced the old man. Then, just like he always did with everyone who came to visit, he told stories about his travels and studies abroad. Of course, our hero never mentioned anything that might change people's good opinion of him. If you believed what he said, he had lived almost like a hermit, overseasoned. Nobody dared to think otherwise. There was joy everywhere in the town and its surroundings. The young doctor, flattered by the warm welcome he received, stopped thinking too much about Paris. But time passed quickly, and feelings changed along with it. After only 15 days, Camilo had already used up all the novelty of his impressions. The farm began to look different, not in beauty, but in boredom. The fields became dull, the trees monotonous, the rivers unexciting, the town tiresome. Even himself seemed boring. A feeling crept over him that we can only call homesickness for exile. "No," he told himself, "I can't stay here for another 3 months. It's either Paris or the cemetery. In 3 months, he'll be dead or on my way to Europe." Camilo's sadness didn't escape his father's eyes, for the old man practically lived watching his son. "He's right," thought the commander. Anyone who has lived in those foreign lands, those places, they say, are so beautiful and lively, can possibly be very happy here. He needs something to do. Politics, for example. "Politics?" Camilo repeated when his father brought up the subject. "What good is politics to me, father?" "It's good for a lot," his father answered. "You can start as a provincial deputy. Later you could go to the chamber in Rio de Janeiro. One day you'll challenge the ministry, and if it falls, you'll rise into power. Never wanted to be a minister yourself?" "Never." "What a shame." "Why?" "Because it's good to be a minister." "Rule men, you mean?" Camilo said with a laugh. "That sex is impossible to govern. I prefer the other." Zebra laughed at the joke, but didn't give up hope of convincing the heir. It had already been 20 days since the doctor returned home, when he remembered the story Soares once told him, and the dream the merchant's son had back at the inn. The first time Camilo went to town and met Soares again, he asked, "Tell me, how is your Isabel? I haven't seen her yet." Soares looked at him with a frown and shrugged, muttering coldly, "I don't know." Camilo didn't push further. The illness is still in its acute phase, he thought to himself. Still, he felt curious to meet pretty Isabelina, the girl who had so deeply affected that talkative political agent. He had already met every young woman in the region for 10 leagues around Dona. Isabel was the only one he hadn't met, yet not exactly because she avoided him, though. Camilo had visited Dr. Mata's farm once before, but they told him Isabel was ill at the time. "Be patient," said a neighbor, noticing Camilo's eagerness to meet Leandro, Soares' beloved. "You'll see her at Colonel Vega's ball, or at the Holy Spirit feast, or on some other occasion." The girl's beauty, which Camilo didn't expect to surpass, or even equal, that of Prince Alexis' widow, along with Soares' hopeless love, and the vague mystery surrounding Isabel, all fed Camilo's curiosity to the highest degree. On the following Sunday, 8 days before the Feast of the Holy Spirit, Camilo left his family's farm to attend Mass at the town church, just as he had done on previous Sundays. Camilo rode slowly on his horse, matching the calm rhythm of his thoughts. He stared out across the open field, longing for feelings he once had but could no longer find. Memories and dreams mixed in his mind, confusing and exciting him all at once. At times, he imagined flying high into the sky with his horse, soaring through the air and landing right in front of the Palais Royal, or somewhere just as grand. Moments later, he pictured himself sitting at the famous Café Tortoni, eating lunch just 2 minutes after Father Michiel had arrived at the altar. Suddenly, as he turned a corner on the road, he saw 2 women on horseback, followed closely by a young servant. Camilo kicked his horse gently and quickly caught up with them. One of the women looked back, smiled, and stopped. Camilo took off his hat, approached her, and reached out his hand. She took it firmly. The woman he greeted was the wife of Lieutenant Colonel Vega. Though she was about 45 years old, she looked much younger. The other woman, noticing her friend had stopped, also pulled her horse to a halt and turned her head to see what was happening. But Camilo wasn't looking at her. He was listening carefully to Donna Gertrudes, who was telling him about her husband. "He's thinking about nothing but the party now," she said. "He must already be at church." "Are you going to Mass?" "I am," Camilo replied. "Then let's go together." They exchanged these few quick words, and Camilo finally turned his eyes to the other rider. But by then, she had already moved a few steps ahead. Camilo rode beside Donna Gertrudes, and the small group continued down the road. They talked for about 10 minutes when suddenly, the horse of the woman in front came to a stop. "What's wrong, Isabel?" Donna Gertrudes asked. "Isabel," Camilo said, surprised, and not even noticing why the question had been asked. The young woman turned her head, shrugged her shoulders, and answered coldly, without emotion. "I don't know." The cause of the horse's hesitation was a rustling sound coming from behind a thick cluster of bamboo bushes to the left side of the path. But before the page or Camilo could check what had startled the animal, the young woman made a final effort. She struck her horse hard with the whip and managed to push it past its fear, galloping ahead of the others. "Isabel," Camilo said to Donna Gertrudes. "Was that girl the daughter of Dr. Matos?" "Yes," she replied. "You didn't know her?" "I haven't seen her in 8 years. Now she's blooming. I can see why people talk so much about her beauty." "I heard she was sick." "She was," Donna Gertrude said. "But her illnesses are not serious. They say it's nervous though, I think. That's just what we say when we don't understand what someone is suffering from." Far ahead, Isabel had stopped and turned slightly to the left, as if admiring the view of the countryside. A few minutes later, her companions reached her. Just as she was about to move forward again, Donna Gertrudes called out, "Isabel." Isabel turned her head. Donna Gertrudes rode closer. "Don't you remember Dr. Camilo Sibra?" "She probably doesn't," Camilo said with a smile. "She was only 12 when I left this town, and that was 8 years ago." "I do remember," Isabel answered softly, nodding slightly, but without looking directly at the doctor. Then, with a gentle flick of her whip, she urged her horse forward and continued down the path. Although their reunion seemed unusual, what struck Camilo most was Isabel's beauty. He thought it truly lived up to the reputation he had heard. At first glance, she appeared taller than average. Her skin was dark, but smooth and soft like satin, with a delicate pink flush across her cheeks, likely from the excitement of the ride, for people often said she was very pale. Camilo couldn't tell the exact color of her eyes, but he felt their brightness, which might have been even more captivating than color itself. She hadn't looked directly at him yet, and still, he understood why Soares had fallen so deeply for this beautiful girl from Goas. He didn't get a clear view, nor could he take it all in of her other features just yet. But what he did see clearly, and had already admired from afar, was the natural grace of her posture and the elegant ease with which she rode her horse. Camilo had seen many skilled and graceful riders before, but there was something unique about her. It could have been the effortless way she moved, or maybe the spontaneity in everything she did. Perhaps it was all those things together that made her stand out so clearly among the others. Isabel would occasionally stop her horse and speak to the colonel's wife, commenting on something they passed the play of light through the trees, a bird flying overhead, or a distant sound carried by the wind. But never once did she glance at Camilo, not even from the corner of her eye. He remained completely absorbed in watching her, so much so that he let his conversation with Dona Gertrude's fade into silence. For several minutes now, the two had been riding side by side without saying a word. Their quiet ride was interrupted by the arrival of another rider approaching quickly from behind the group at a steady gallop. It was Soares. The merchant's son looked very different from how he'd been lately. He greeted them with a smile, cheerful and full of energy, just like he had been during the early days of the doctor's trip. But beneath that happiness, it wasn't hard to see the truth. His joy was only pretend. Every now and then, Soares' face tightened with worry, or he gave a small gesture of despair, unnoticed by the others. He feared losing Isabel to a man who was better looking, smarter, and right now far more popular. Camilo had become the center of attention, the talk of the town, the most important person of the day, the man everyone seemed to admire. And Soares, poor Soares, was left struggling silently with jealousy and doubt. Leandro Soares had no luck left, none at all. The last hope he held was that Isabel might die free from any marital ties, but now even that hope seemed to vanish. Like many unhappy lovers before him, he wanted the cup of love to be broken or useless if he couldn't drink from it himself. His fear grew worse when, hiding once again in the bamboo grove I mentioned earlier, his usual spot to watch Isabel ride by, noticed someone new in her group. It was Camilo. Shocked, Leandro almost cried out, and even stepped forward toward the road. He caught himself just in time. The riders passed without noticing him, leaving Leandro alone with his rage. He swore to heaven and earth that he would get revenge on this bold rival. If indeed, Camilo was a rival. But he wasn't. Camilo's heart still carried the fresh memory of Artemisa, the young woman from Moscow. Her tears, though miles away, still burned in his mind. But how could anyone convince Leandro Soares that Camilo, the handsome, well-mannered man who had returned from Europe, wouldn't fall for Isabel's charms? Isabel, for her part, saw Leandro and stopped her horse. She reached out to him with a warm smile. That smile, though lovely, did little to ease Leandro's doubts. But Camilo saw it too, and thought to himself, she loves him, or she's a very clever actress. By chance, for the first time ever, Isabel looked straight at Camilo, the son of the respected commendador. Something in her face told him she understood what he was thinking. She frowned slightly, showing surprise so clearly that Camilo felt confused. Without meaning to, he whispered to himself. Or maybe she speaks with the devil. Perhaps, Isabel murmured softly, eyes fixed on the ground. She said it quietly, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. And no one did. Not quite. Camilo couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful Isabel. He felt half surprised, half intrigued, ever since she whispered those words under such strange circumstances. Soares watched Camilo with a look that mixed affection and menace, like a hawk circling above a dove. Meanwhile, Isabel played with her small whip, unaware or pretending not to notice. Donna Gertrudes, worried about missing Father Maciel's Mass and facing her husband's gentle scolding, called for everyone to move on. The group obeyed at once and started walking again, leaving the moment behind them. Chapter 4. The following morning dawned bright and clear, as if the sun itself had dressed up for the occasion. By early light, the town of Santa Lucia buzzed with energy. People had come for miles around on foot, by cart, on horseback, all drawn by the annual celebration of the Holy Spirit, a festival as old as the land itself. This was no ordinary party. It was a tradition passed down through generations, one of the last places where such customs still live strong. In the future, writers would look back at these moments with wonder, trying to capture a Brazil that once was, before it faded into memory. Back then, Santa Lucia's celebration stood out as one of the most authentic. And at its heart was Lieutenant Colonel Vega, the self-proclaimed Emperor of the Divine. He owned a house in town, and it was there Saturday night that the group of shepherds arrived. They came dressed in bright, colorful clothes, men and women alike each step. They took adding rhythm to the night. At their head walked the Velho, the old man of the tale, dressed in knee breeches, silk stockings, flat shoes, a slim coat, and a long waistcoat. In one hand he held a cane, in the other the spirit of the old world. Camilo had been visiting the colonel when the music began. A few musicians led the way, followed by dozens of townspeople. They formed a circle right in front of the house. A shepherd and shepherdess stepped forward, and the dance began. They sang, they played, they danced with joy. The music echoed through the streets, filling the colonel's home with life. He stood by the door, grinning from ear to ear, clearly enjoying every moment. It was hard to say what he loved more, being Emperor of the Holy Spirit, or being a powerful man in the eyes of the law. Perhaps no one would ever know. But Saturday's display was only a taste of what was to come. Sunday promised even greater things, and the sky seemed to understand. The sun rose high, its rays golden and warm. The sky stretched above, a perfect shade of blue. The night before had brought thick clouds that worried the planners. But just before dawn, a strong wind blew through, clearing the sky and washing the air clean. The people of Santa Lucia came out in full force, ready to celebrate. Nature had done its part, and now it was their turn. Camilo's morning started earlier than he liked. By sunrise, the town was already buzzing with excitement. Firecrackers crackled in the air. Church bells rang joyfully, and the whole place felt alive. Camilo had spent the night at Father Machiel's house, a quiet spot near the center of town. He wasn't used to such noise first thing in the morning, especially not this early. He had gotten into the habit of sleeping until 11, a luxury he'd picked up while living in Paris. His father, the commendador, had always respected that habit, even after Camilo returned home. But on Sundays, there was no escape. He had to go to Mass. It was just one of those small-town traditions you couldn't ignore. So when a loud explosion rattled his window and jolted him awake, Camilo groaned. "What the devil is going on?" he shouted from under the covers. Father Machiel peeked through the door, already dressed and smiling. "What do you think?" the priest replied. "It's the festival." "The festival? At this hour?" Camilo asked, rubbing his eyes. "At this hour," the priest laughed. "It's already light outside." There was no chance of falling back asleep now. Camilo got up, washed his face, and joined Father Machiel for breakfast. They talked about everything and nothing. Camilo told 2 stories from his time in Paris, stories that made the priest laugh and shake his head. "I swear," Camilo said, sipping his coffee, "Paris is the perfect city." Then they left the house together, walking toward the main square. The streets were full of people getting ready for the celebration of the Divine Spirit, a big event in town. As they walked, they saw Leandro's swords in the distance. Camilo turned to the priest and asked, "Father, why won't Isabel Matos give Leandro a chance? Everyone knows he's crazy about her." The priest adjusted his glasses and gave Camilo a sharp look. "You sound like an idiot," he said plainly. Camilo smirked. "Maybe. But I'm not the only one asking that question." "That's true," the priest admitted. "Still, some things are better left unsaid. She just doesn't like him. That's all there is to it." "But don't you think she's a bit strange?" Camilo pressed. "No," the priest said firmly. "I think she's clever. Too clever for someone like Leandro." Camilo stood by the window, staring out at the dusty street as Father Silveira paced behind him. The two had been talking for over an hour, circling around the same topic: Isabel's refusal to marry Soares. Why would she turn him down? Camilo asked again, frowning. "I think it's ambition," the priest said quietly. "She doesn't want a quiet life with Soares. She is waiting for someone who can give her power, maybe even a political match." Camilo rolled his eyes and shrugged. "I don't believe that." "I might be wrong," the priest admitted, "but I'm almost sure. Everyone else has their own theories about why Isabel won't settle down, but they all sound ridiculous. Mine makes the most sense." Camilo shook his head, not fully convinced. He offered a few counterpoints, but didn't push too hard. After a moment, he thanked the priest and left, heading straight to the home of Lieutenant Colonel Vega. The colonel, known among locals as the Festive Emperor, was in a state of high excitement. This was his first time organizing such an important church event, and he wanted everything perfect, better than any of his predecessors had done. His pride wasn't just personal, it was also political. A few of his rivals had whispered doubts, saying he wasn't up to the task. "They'll see," had told his friends when he heard those rumors. "They'll see what I can do." When Camilo arrived, Vega had just finished giving instructions about the dinner that would follow the ceremony. He was now listening carefully to his brother, a local church official, explained some details about the altar service. Camilo hesitated at the door. "I wouldn't dare interrupt you, Colonel," he said politely when Vega finally turned to him. "You must be busy." "You're not interrupting," Vega replied with a proud smile. "Everything's under control now. Is your father coming? He should already be here." "Have you seen the church yet?" "No, not yet." "It looks amazing," Vega said, clearly proud. "I don't mean to brag, but I think this celebration will be better than the last ones. In some ways, much better." It was impossible to disagree not when the man himself was praising his own work so openly. Camilo nodded eagerly, adding more praise to make the colonel feel even more confident. "Yes, sir," he said. "Everyone's going to talk about how well this came together." Colonel Vega listened with a quiet, satisfied smile, ready to explain that his young friend still didn't fully understand the situation. But Camilo changed the subject suddenly. "Has Dr. Matos arrived yet?" he asked. "Yes, he has." "With his family?" "Yes, with his family." At that moment, they were interrupted by the sound of fireworks and music coming closer. "There they are," said Vega. "They're here to pick me up. If you'll excuse me." Until then, the colonel had been wearing black trousers and a simple cotton jacket. Now he hurried to dress in the official uniform and insignia of his high rank. Camilo walked to the window to see the procession. It wasn't long before the parade came into view. It included a marching band, the Brotherhood of the Holy Spirit, and the shepherds from the night before. The brothers wore their bright red robes and walked with a slow, solemn pace. A large crowd filled the street and gathered in front of the lieutenant colonel's house, eager to see him leave. When the procession stopped in front of the colonel's house, the music stopped and everyone turned their eyes to the windows. But the colonel was still finishing his final preparations. The crowd had to be satisfied with seeing Dr. Camilo instead. Meanwhile, 4 or 6 of the more senior brothers separated from the group and climbed the stairs to the colonel's apartment. A few minutes later, Camilo greeted these senior brothers. One of them stood out not only for his rank but especially for his height. Major Brass was a tall man, and that might have been his most striking feature, if not for his extreme thinness. Despite his unusual build, the major's robe fit him surprisingly well. It didn't go all the way down to his calves like the others, nor did it stop at his waist, as it should have if it had been made to regular measurements. It was a kind of middle-length design just for him, to balance elegance with the major's unique body type. Camilo stood near the door, surrounded by a group of men dressed in their finest suits, all waiting with quiet excitement. These were the graduate brothers, important figures in the community, and they all reached out to shake Camilo's hand when he arrived. "Where's the lieutenant colonel?" one asked eagerly. "He'll be here soon," Camilo replied. "He just went to change." Another brother looked toward the church and said, "It's already full." "Everyone is waiting for him." "That's only right," Major Brass declared. A few heads nodded in agreement. "We have time," the tall officer added. "The ceremony isn't far from here." Others murmured approval, clearly satisfied with his words. Then Major Brass turned back to Camilo and began to describe all the trouble they had gone through to prepare for the event. He mentioned not only himself, but also the other gentlemen who helped organize everything, including the lieutenant colonel. And as a reward for our small efforts, Bras continued proudly, we can say that this day will surely be a success. Camilo politely shook his head at the word small. He knew how much work had gone into this. Before the major could finish speaking, a figure appeared in the doorway behind them. Camilo froze. He had read about the traditional clothing worn by emperors of the Holy Spirit, but nothing, not even his wildest imagination, could have prepared him for what he saw now. The lieutenant colonel stepped forward wearing black trousers like before, but now covered by a perfectly tailored dark coat. It was elegant, sharp, and clearly made by a skilled tailor, perhaps, even better than those worn by members of the city's most exclusive clubs. That alone would have been impressive. But it was what came next that truly stunned Camilo. On top of his head, the lieutenant colonel wore a large golden crown made of cardboard, painted and polished to shine like real gold. Camilo took a step back, eyes wide, staring at the strange and dazzling object on the man's head. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lieutenant Colonel looked around, a little dazed. He had almost forgotten how important this kind of thing was for events like this one. After 8 years living far away among a different kind of society, he hadn't expected to find traditions still alive that he thought had long disappeared. He shook hands with all of his friends and said he was ready to go with them. "Let's not keep the people waiting," he said. Right away, they went down to the street. The crowd stirred with curiosity when they saw the red robes of one of the brothers appear at the door. Moments later, another red robe came into view, and soon the rest followed, surrounding the colorful emperor. When the golden crown caught the sunlight, it sparkled so brightly, it looked almost magical. The lieutenant colonel glanced left and right, politely nodding to a few familiar faces in the crowd before stepping into his honored place in the procession. The band began to play a lively march, and the lieutenant colonel, along with the brotherhood and the shepherds, started walking toward the church. As soon as the church saw the group arriving, the bell ringer who had been waiting patiently rang the bells with great energy. At the same time, fireworks burst into the sky, sending sparks high above, as if telling the clouds themselves that the Emperor of the Divine had arrived. Inside the church, everyone grew excited the moment they heard the news. An energetic master of ceremonies tried hard to make space, opening a path through the crowd. But the people, eager to catch a glimpse of the lieutenant colonel, pushed forward chaotically, undoing all the man's efforts. In the end, things happened just like they always do in such moments. Slowly but surely, the crowd made way on its own. With some difficulty, the lieutenant colonel walked through, surrounded by the members of the Brotherhood, until he reached the throne set up beside the main altar. He walked up the steps of the throne with confidence and sat down, looking as proud as if he ruled every empire in the world from that seat. When Camilo arrived at the church, the celebration had already begun. He found a spot that seemed bad at first, but turned out perfect because from there he could see a large group of women. Among them he spotted the beautiful Isabel. Camilo felt eager to talk to Isabel again. Their meeting on the road, and her unusual sharpness during that moment, had stayed in his mind. At first she seemed not to notice him. But Camilo knew how to read women well enough to realize she had seen him, and was choosing not to look his way. This, along with what had happened the previous Sunday, led him to ask himself one question. What could she possibly have against me? The celebration went on without anything unusual. Camilo couldn't take his eyes off this lovely mystery, as he now called her. Yet, the mystery showed no sign of curiosity or interest. Still, near the end, their eyes met. Truth must be told, had caught her watching him. He greeted her, and she returned the greeting politely. That was all. Once the event ended, the Brotherhood escorted the lieutenant colonel back home. In the middle of the crowd leaving, while Camilo kept staring at Isabel, he heard a voice, a strange and unfamiliar whisper in his ear. "Be careful what you do." Camilo turned around and saw a short, thin man with small, alert eyes. The men wore simple but neat clothes. They stared at each other for a few seconds without speaking. Camilo didn't recognize the face and hesitated to ask for an explanation of those strange words, though he burned with curiosity. "There's a secret," the stranger continued. "Do you want to uncover it?" Silence followed. "This isn't the place," Camilo finally said. "But if you have something to tell me." Leaning close, the thin little man with sharp eyes whispered just enough for Camilo to hear. "No, figure it out yourself," he said. Then he vanished into the crowd. Camilo pushed through the mass of people, bumping into at least 10 or 12 folks, stepping on 15 or 20 feet, and apologizing just as many times for his clumsiness. When he finally reached the street, there was no sign of the strange man anywhere. "A novel," he muttered to himself. "I feel like I'm living in a novel." Just then, Isabel, Dona Gertrudes, and Dr. Matos were walking out of the church. Camilo approached them and greeted the group. Dr. Matos offered his arm to Dona Gertrudes. Camilo, more quietly and with some nervousness, offered his to Isabel. She hesitated for a moment, but how could she refuse? She slipped her arm gently into his, and together. The small group began walking toward the colonel's house, where he and other important figures from town were already waiting. Among the crowd, someone else also walked toward the colonel's home. His eyes stayed fixed on Camilo and Isabel the whole time. That man bit his lip so hard it started to bleed. There's no need to say his name, everyone already knows. It was Leandro Soares. Chapter 5. The walk from the church to the house was short, and so was the conversation between Isabel and Camilo. But even so, dear reader, if you feel any sympathy for the Muscovite princess, you should truly pity her now. The dawn of a new feeling began to shine in Camilo's heart. As he climbed the stairs, Camilo, son of the Honorable Commendador, quietly admitted to himself that this lovely lady had qualities far greater than those of the beautiful Russian princess. An hour and a half later, near the end of dinner, Camilo's heart fully agreed with what his thoughtful mind had discovered. Their talk was about nothing special at all. Yet Isabel spoke with such softness and charm, always keeping her usual calm and modest way. Her eyes were so lovely up close, and her hair too, and her mouth just as beautiful, and her hands equally perfect. If Camilo had not been young and full of passion, he might have resisted all that grace. But as it was, he could do nothing but fall deeper. Dinner went on without surprises. At the colonel's table sat everyone important in town: the priest, the local judge, the merchant. The landowner, around there was great friendliness and harmony from one end of the table to the other. The emperor of the divine spirit, now dressed once again in his everyday clothes, served the guests with true joy. The festival was the main topic of the evening, though mixed in were political comments. Everyone agreed on politics, because they all belonged to the same party, men and women alike. Major Bras had a habit of making one or two long and passionate toasts at every formal dinner he attended. His gift for speaking was unmatched anywhere in the province. And since he stood taller than almost everyone else, he naturally commanded attention. Just standing up was already half a victory. Bras, the major, couldn't let the lieutenant colonel's dinner go by without saying something. Dessert was about to start when the talkative major asked for permission to share a few simple and honest words. A low murmur, like the disapproving noise in a courtroom, filled the room. Everyone got ready to hear what he had to say. "The honorable audience listening to me," he began, "will forgive my boldness. It's not talent speaking to you, gentlemen, it's the heart. My toast is short," he continued, "to celebrate the virtues and abilities of the great Lieutenant Colonel Vega. No long speech is needed. His name says it all. My voice adds nothing." The crowd showed they liked the first part of that sentence without doubt, but had doubts about the second part. In other words, they praised both the lieutenant colonel and the major. And the speaker, who had just said he wouldn't say much, went on like this. "The huge event we've just seen, gentlemen, I believe, will never be forgotten. Many Holy Spirit festivals have happened in this city and others, but never has the people felt such joy in seeing a brightness. A life, a victory equal to what our respected friend and comrade, Lieutenant Colonel Vega, gave us. He's the pride of his class, and the glory of his party. And I intend to die in it," the lieutenant colonel added. "No other answer would I expect from your honor," the speaker said, changing his tone slightly, as if sharing a secret. Despite what he had said earlier that nothing more needed to be added about the lieutenant colonel's qualities, the brave speaker talked for about 25 minutes. This made Father Machiel, who had been eyeing a soft, wobbly bread pudding from afar, very unhappy. The town judge, who couldn't wait to go outside for a smoke, was also clearly annoyed. The closing remarks of that memorable speech went something like this. "I would fail in my duties as a friend, a fellow party member, a subordinate, and an admiral if I didn't speak up today. I must tell you, in rough words, yes, some disapproval in the crowd, but honest words, what I feel inside. The deep excitement I have when I look at the honorable and respected Lieutenant Colonel Vega. And I must ask you all to join me in a toast to His Excellency." The audience responded with great enthusiasm to Major Brass' toast. The Lieutenant Colonel answered with a few, but heartfelt words. "The kind words the distinguished Major Brass has just said about me are true favors from a great and generous soul. I don't deserve them, gentlemen. I return them, untouched, to the illustrious speaker who came before me." In the middle of the joy and celebration, no one seemed to notice the attention Camilo was giving to Dr. Matos' beautiful daughter. No one, I should say, except Leandro Soares. He had been invited to the dinner and had stayed through it all. His eyes never left his elegant rival and the lovely, distant lady by his side. It may seem like a miracle to the reader that Soares could watch his rival's advances with such calm and even cheer. But it wasn't a miracle. Soares had looked into Isabel's eyes too, and what he saw there was clear. Indifference, maybe even contempt for the son of the commendador. Neither he nor I, thought the suitor to himself. Camilo had fallen deeply in love. The next day he woke up even more lovesick. Each passing day made the fire inside him burn hotter. Paris and the princess both had vanished from the young man's heart and mind. Now only one person and one place mattered to him: Isabel and Goas. And Isabel's coldness and rejections had done little to slow this change that had, in fact, only made it stronger. Camilo felt sure he was better than his rival. He thought to himself, if she pays no attention to me, she must care even less about Sora's son. But why is she so cold toward me? What could make me fail like any common suitor? At times like these, he remembered the stranger who had spoken to him at church and the words they had shared. There must be some mystery, he told himself. But how can I uncover it? He asked around town about the short man with sharp, lively eyes. No one could tell him anything. It seemed strange that in such a small place, nobody knew a man someone surely should recognize. Camilo tried harder to find answers, but no one could say who this mysterious figure was. Meanwhile, Camilo kept visiting Dr. Matos's farm and dined there now and then. Talking freely with Isabel was hard. Customs were still strict in those days, but Camilo did his best to show her how he felt. Yet Isabel acted more and more as if she didn't understand his feelings at all. Her behavior wasn't openly cold, but it wasn't warm either. People whispered that inside her chest beat a heart made of snow. Rejection fed his pride, which soon turned into wounded pride, frustration, and shame. All of this, plus a local outbreak of sickness, finally brought Camilo to bed. For now, well, leave him there, under the care of his doctor friends. Chapter 6. Revelation. There are no secrets for a writer who knows how to explore every corner of the human heart. While the people of Santa Lucia guess and gossip about why beautiful Isabel seems so indifferent to love, I can finally tell you the truth. She does feel something deeply. But what man has won her heart? You ask, eager to know. She loves a parasite. A parasite. Yes, a parasite. You must be thinking it's a flower, a miracle of freshness and scent. But no, it's not a flower at all. It is an ugly one, dried up and withered. Once, long ago, it might have been very beautiful on the branch. Now, tucked in the little basket she carries, it inspires nothing but curiosity. And that's exactly what makes it strange. How could a girl of 20, full of life and feeling, ignore all the men who admire her, and instead pour all her affection into this faded, lifeless thing? Ah, but this flower was picked under very special circumstances. The story began years earlier. Back then, a young man from town was very fond of Isabel. She was just a child then, playful and charming, and he used to joke that she was his wife, a harmless game that time never made real. Still, Isabel liked him too. Her father even started to think, if things stay like this, and he ever truly falls for her, maybe I should let them marry. Isabel had no idea her father thought this way, but she kept liking the boy, and he kept finding her delightful. One day, Isabel saw a beautiful blue parasitic flower caught between the branches of a tree. "How pretty," she said. "You want it, don't you?" he teased. "I do," she replied, already learning, without being taught, how to speak in hints and soft words. Without ceremony, as if she were still a child, He took off his jacket and climbed the tree to reach it. Isabel stood under the tree, breathless and full of hope. It wasn't long before the kind young man reached for the flower and gently picked it. "Catch!" he called from above. Isabel stepped closer and caught the flower in her arms. She was happy to see the boy had done something sweet for her. He tried to climb down, but he did it so clumsily that 2 minutes later, he fell straight to the ground at Isabel's feet. She screamed in fear and shouted for help. The boy tried to calm her by saying it was nothing serious and tried to stand up with a smile. He got up, yes, but his shirt was now spotted with blood. He had hurt his head. Luckily, the wound wasn't bad. In just a few days, the brave boy was back on his feet again. That moment left a deep mark on Isabel's heart. Until then, she had liked him. From that day forward, she loved him completely. The flower he had picked for her eventually dried out. But Isabel kept it like a treasure. She kissed it every day, and after some time, she even cried over it. A kind of quiet worship connected her heart to that little, withered plant. It would be wrong to say she had no kindness in her heart, because when she heard Camilo was sick, she felt truly moved. She asked many times about his condition. 5 days later, she went with her father to visit him at the farm owned by the honored man. That simple visit didn't cure the sick boy, but it gave him comfort and strength. Some hope bloomed inside him, again hope that had been drier and more faded than the parasitic plant I just told you about. Maybe now she'll love me, he thought. As soon as he was well again, his first wish was to go to Dr. Mato's farm. The honored man wanted to come with him, but they didn't find the doctor at home. Only his sister and daughter were there. The sister was an old woman who lived with many troubles. Besides being old, she was also hard of hearing and very interested in politics. Camilo saw his chance. While Isabel's aunt kept the commander fully occupied, he moved quickly. He approached Isabel and spoke with quiet urgency. "I want to thank you," he said, "for your kindness during my illness. That same kindness gives me courage to ask for something more." Isabel frowned slightly. "A few days ago," Camilo went on, "you brought back a hope I thought was gone forever. Was it just my imagination? One word from you, one gesture, could clear this up." She lifted her shoulders in a small shrug. "I don't understand," she said. "Yes, you do," Camilo replied, his voice bitter now. "But if you need more honesty, I'll give it. I love you. I've told you 1,000 times, and you never listened. But now..." He would have finished that speech too if only she had stayed to hear it. But Isabel didn't wait. Without a word or even a glance, she crossed the wide porch and sat at the far end, where her aunt continued chatting loudly with the commander. Camilo stood there, stunned. His disappointment was worse than he could describe. Pretending to feel hot, he stepped outside for some air. Walking slowly at first, then faster, depending on whether anger or sadness ruled him at the moment, he wandered without purpose. He dreamed of revenge. He imagined running back to beg at her feet. He replayed every meeting, every word they'd shared. After nearly an hour of this, he finally accepted the truth. Everything was lost. That's when he noticed where he was. He had stopped by a small stream that cut through Dr. Mato's farm. The place felt wild and strangely suited to his mood. About 200 steps away, he saw a little hut. From inside came the sound of someone singing a folk tune from the countryside. There's nothing more annoying than other people's happiness when you're stuck in your own pain. Camilo felt his anger rising, and in a moment of quiet confusion he asked himself if anyone could truly be happy when his own heart was breaking with despair. Just then, a man appeared at the door of the hut and walked toward the stream. Camilo shivered. Something about the man looked familiar. He thought he recognized the mysterious stranger who had spoken to him on the day of the feast of the Holy Spirit. It seemed like the same height, the same posture. Camilo stepped closer, stopping only 5 steps away. The man turned his headies. It was him. Camilo hurried forward. "Finally," Camilo said. The stranger smiled kindly and shook Camilo's outstretched hand. "Would you like to rest?" he asked. "No," the doctor replied. "Here is fine, or we can go farther if you prefer. But please, right now, I want you to explain what you meant when you spoke to me in church the other day." The stranger smiled again. "Well," Camilo said after a pause, seeing that the man didn't answer. "Before anything else, tell me, do you really love this girl?" "Oh yes, very much." "And do you swear you would make her happy?" "I swear it." "Then listen carefully. What I'm going to tell you is true. We heard it from my wife, who used to work for Donna Isabel." "That woman over there," he said, pointing toward the hut. Camilo glanced at the doorway and saw a tall, graceful mulatto girl watching him with interest. "Now," the stranger continued, "let's walk a little farther so she won't hear us. I don't want her ever finding out who told you this story." They moved along the edge of the stream, away from the hut. There, the stranger told Camilo everything about the blue parasitic flower, and how the girl had once loved it deeply, even when it was already dead. A less careful reader might imagine that Camilo listened to this sad tale with sorrow and sadness. But someone who knows how to read between the lines will understand at once that the stranger's words filled Camilo's heart with wild bursts of joy. Camilo stood there, heart pounding, as the stranger finished speaking. "This is all I have to say," the man said, his voice calm but firm. "I believe your honor now knows exactly what kind of ground you're standing on." "Oh yes, yes," Camilo cried out, barely able to contain himself. "I am loved. I am truly loved." The doctor could hardly wait to leave. He needed to get back home, back to Isabel as fast as he could. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and took a 20,000 Ri bill. "The service you've just done for me," Camilo said, "is priceless. This is nothing compared to what you deserve. Just a small token." He handed the money to the stranger. The man looked at it with a quiet smile, almost like he was amused. He didn't speak. Instead, he took the note between 2 fingers and, without a word, tossed it into the stream. The thin current of water, gently flowing over the stones, carried the bill away along with a leaf that had fallen from somewhere above. The paper disappeared quickly, swallowed by the stream's quiet rhythm. "In this way," the stranger finally said, "you owe me no favor, and I accept no payment. Don't think I did this to serve you. Noi only wanted to make the daughter of my benefactor happy. I knew she loved a young man. I also knew that young man could bring her happiness. So I simply opened the path for him to reach her. That kind of thing cannot be paid for, it can only be thanked for. With that, the man turned around and walked toward the little hut nearby. Camilo watched him go, eyes fixed on the figure disappearing into the trees. Not long after, Camilo arrived at Isabel's house. She had been waiting for him, clearly anxious. When she saw him walk in, his face glowing with joy, her own expression lit up. "I know everything," Camilo whispered to her just before he left. She stared at him, surprised. "Everything?" she repeated. "Yes," he said, smiling. "I know you love me. I know your love began many years ago, when you were still a child. And I know it has never changed." But before he could finish, they were interrupted by the approach of the comendador. Isabel turned pale, then flushed. She was grateful for the interruption because, honestly, she didn't know how to respond. The next morning, Camilo wrote her a long, passionate letter. He begged her to remember the love she once carried in her heart and asked her to make him happy. He waited 2 full days for her reply. On the 3rd day, it arrived short and cold. Isabel admitted she had loved him all that time and swore she would never love another. "That was all," she said. "As for becoming his wife, never. I always wanted to give my life to someone who loved me as much as I loved him. Your love is new. Mine has lasted 9 years. The age difference is too great. Our marriage would never work. Forget me, and goodbye." To say this letter only deepened Camilo's love would be stating what the reader already knows. His heart had only been waiting for her written confession to cross the line into obsession. Her words threw him into complete chaos. Chapter 7. The events began to move quickly now. The commander hadn't given up on pushing his son into politics. Coincidentally, there was an election that very year. The commander wrote to the most powerful people in the province, trying to get the boy a seat in the local assembly. Camilo heard about his father's plan. He simply shrugged it off, determined not to accept anything unless it came with Isabel's hand in marriage. His father, Father Michiel, and the lieutenant colonel all tried to persuade him, painting visions of a brilliant future full of high honors and public recognition. But only one honor truly mattered to him: marrying Isabel. It wouldn't be easy, he knew. Isabel seemed firm in her decision. "She loves me," he thought to himself. That's already half the battle. Since his love was newer than hers, Camilo realized that to make up for the years between them, he had to prove his feelings were stronger and deeper, willing to endure more sacrifices. He didn't hold back. Rain or storm, he walked through every kind of weather just to see her every day. He became devoted to fulfilling even her smallest wishes. If she ever felt curious, like a child wanting to touch the morning star, he probably would found a way to bring it down for her. At the same time, he stopped bothering her with love letters or sweet words. The last thing he said to her was, "I will wait." With this hope he passed many weeks, though his situation didn't seem to improve much. Some readers might find Isabel's decision strange even after learning she was loved. I agree with them, but I won't change who she is. She is exactly as I have shown here. She believed that being loved by chance, only because he returned from Paris, while she had spent years thinking of him, and living only for that memory. She believed this made her feel small. And because she was deeply proud, she decided she wouldn't marry him or anyone else. It may sound absurd, but that was how she felt. Camilo had tired of chasing the girl with no success. On the other side, he felt he needed to prove his love in a dramatic way, hoping it might finally win her over and break her cold resolve. So, he planned a bold move. One morning, he simply vanished from the farm. At first, no one worried too much. Camilo often went for long rides, especially if he woke up early. But as time passed, concern turned into fear. People were sent in every direction to look for him, but none could find a trace. His father became deeply frightened. The news spread fast across the region, reaching everyone within 10 miles. After 5 days of searching with nothing to show for it, someone reported seeing a young man matching Camilo's description just half a mile outside town, riding alone and looking sad. A cattle driver later said he saw a boy near a steep cliff, staring down as if wondering how easy it would be to fall. The commander offered large rewards to anyone who could give real news about his son. All his friends sent people out to search forests and fields. Everyone worked hard, but another week passed with no luck. Can we even describe the pain Isabel felt when she heard Camilo was gone? At first, she seemed calm, her face hiding the storm inside. 10 minutes later, the storm reached her eyes and burst into a sea of tears. Only then did her father understand the depth of the love she had hidden for so long. Seeing her cry like this, he feared her heartbreak might destroy her completely. He thought Camilo had disappeared to escape a forced marriage. But Isabel calmed him, explaining that it was she who had refused Camilo's love all along. "I killed him," she cried, heartbroken and full of guilt. The old man couldn't quite understand why a young couple, clearly in love, would choose to separate instead of moving toward marriage. He remembered that his own actions had been the opposite. As soon as he started courting, he wasted no time. A week later, Dr. Matos was visited at his farm by the man from the cabin, Miguel, whose face shone with excitement. "He's saved," Miguel said. "Saved!" cried both the doctor and his daughter. "Yes," replied Miguel. "I found him yesterday afternoon at the bottom of a ravine, almost dead." "Then why didn't you come sooner?" the old man asked. "Because I had to take care of him first. When he woke up, he tried to end his life again. My wife and I stopped him. He's still weak, so he couldn't come with me." Isabel's face lit up. A few quiet tears rolled down her cheeks, but now they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Before leaving, Miguel promised that the doctor would come personally to bring Isabel to Camilo. When they were finally alone, the doctor turned to his daughter. "And now, Isabel," he said gently, "what do you want to do?" "Whatever you say, Father. I'll only say what your heart tells you." "And what does it say?" "It says yes." "That's what it should have said long ago, but—" He paused. "But what if this suicide attempt had another reason?" he thought. "I must find out everything." As soon as the news reached the comendador, he hurried to Dr. Matos' house. Not long after, Camilo arrived too. The poor boy looked deeply shaken, carrying on his face the shame and pain of having survived the death he had sought. At least, that's what he repeated many times on the way to the doctor's home. But what caused this decision? The doctor finally asked. The cause Camilo stammered, clearly caught off guard. "I don't dare confess it." Camilo stood by the window, his fingers tapping nervously against the wooden frame. The old man watched him with a kind smile. "Is it something shameful?" he asked gently. "Oh no," Camilo replied quickly. "But what is it then? May I tell you without offending you?" "Why not?" "No, I don't dare," Camilo said firmly. "It's useless, because I already know." Oh. "And I forgive the reason, but not your decision. You acted like a child. But she despises me." "No. She loves you." At that moment, Camilo made a perfect show of surprise. He walked quietly beside the old man back to the house, where they found Isabel's father waiting. The man looked unsure whether to be angry or pleased. As soon as Camilo entered, he understood the effect his accident had on Isabel's heart. "Well then," said Isabel's father, "now that we've brought him back to life, we must chain him to it with something strong." Without waiting for formalities or following the usual rules of society, Isabel's father told the commendador the news. It was absolutely necessary to marry their children. The commendador hadn't yet recovered from the shock of finding his son alive when he heard this new piece of information. If an entire tribe of Zivante's warriors had suddenly attacked him with bows and arrows, he couldn't have been more surprised. He looked around at everyone in the room, as if asking them to explain something perfectly normal that he still could not understand. Eventually, they explained Camilo and Isabel's love story. That was the only reason behind the almost suicide. The commendador approved of his son's choice. In fact, he went so far as to say that, in Camilo's place, he would have done exactly the same assuming he had the girl's permission. Alone with Isabel, Camilo whispered, "Will I finally be worthy of your love?" "Oh yes," she answered. "If you had died, I would have died too." Camilo hurried to say that Providence had protected him. No one ever figured out exactly what he meant by Providence. It didn't take long for the full story of this dramatic episode to spread across the city and beyond. Leandro Soares couldn't believe what he'd just heard. When he found out that Isabel and Camilo were getting married, he completely lost his head. He thought of 100 terrible plans, each one worse than the last. In his mind, they were both liars who had betrayed him. He had to take revenge big time. No cruel king or queen could have imagined punishments as harsh as the ones Leandro dreamed up. For 2 days and nights straight, he stayed awake, going over every possible way to hurt them. On the 3rd day, he made up his mind. He would go find Camilo, confront him face to face, and then kill him. He grabbed a knife and started walking. Meanwhile, Camilo was leaving the farm, unaware of what was coming. His heart was full of joy. He pictured a life with Isabel, peaceful and happy, like something from a dream. Everything around him seemed beautiful, painted in soft colors by the image of her face. He was so caught up in these thoughts, when suddenly, there stood Leandro, the man he had forgotten in all his happiness. Camilo understood the danger right away and got ready. Leandro, true to his plan, started shouting insults at Camilo, who stood quietly and listened. When Leandro finally stopped talking and moved to attack, Camilo spoke calmly. "I've listened to everything you said. Now I ask you to hear me out. Yes, "I'm marrying Isabel. But she doesn't love you and she doesn't love me either. What crime have we committed? While you feel hatred toward me, I've been thinking about your future." "Oh, really?" Leandro said mockingly. "Yes, really," Camilo replied. "I told myself that someone with your talent shouldn't spend his whole life helping others climb up while staying stuck below. My father wants me to be a provincial deputy, whether I want it or not. So I told him I'd accept the position, but only if he gave it to you instead. My father agreed, but I still have to fight some political battles. And I'm working hard to win them." Camilo had just done something that, in most people's eyes, deserved at least a little respect, not hatred. Surely not that. But Leandro Soares didn't see it that way. His face twisted with anger the moment Camilo spoke. Blood rushed to his cheeks, and his eyes burned like they were ready to shoot sparks. His lips trembled as if trying to whisper a curse against the man who now seemed so lucky. Leandro finally broke the silence. "What you did was bad enough," he said, voice shaking. "You didn't have to add insult to injury." "Injury?" Camilo repeated, confused. "What else should I call it?" Leandro snapped. "You take away the only happiness I ever hoped for, and then you come here pretending to care. You think offering me some political favor will make things better?" Camilo tried to explain himself. He hadn't meant to offer compensation. He truly believed Leandro would appreciate the suggestion. After all, he knew how much politics meant to him. "And besides," Camilo added, trying to sound calm and serious, "I thought I was doing what was best for the province. I'd never suggest anything harmful to our region or our country. Not even if my life depended on it. I thought I was helping both by supporting your candidacy. And believe me, others will agree with me." Leandro stared at Camilo, his eyes sharp and cold. Then slowly, a smirk appeared on his face, a yawn full of mockery and quiet threats. He didn't speak right away. He just kept watching Camilo, letting the silence stretch between them like a tight rope. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he opened his mouth again. Camilo stood there, watching Soares pace the room. The silence between them felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. "What would you do in my place?" Soares asked, his voice low, his smile sharp but strangely sad. "I'd say no," Camilo replied quickly. "So simple as that?" "Yes. I don't have the taste for politics. But you do. You're practically the pillar of your party around here." Soares nodded, pride flashing in his eyes. "I believe that to be true. You're not the only one. Everyone sees it." Soares started walking again, back and forth, his thoughts racing faster than his feet. Was some deep sense of right and wrong holding him back? Or was he trying to decide how much pain he could cause without losing himself completely? 5 minutes passed like this. Then he stopped, suddenly, right in front of Camilo. "Promise me something," he said. "What is it?" "That you'll make her happy." "I already promised myself that." "It's the sweetest duty I've ever had. If things had gone differently, that duty would have been mine. But they didn't. Still am ready to let go." Camilo reached out and took Soares' hand. "You have a big heart. I know that. Maybe. What you don't know, what you can't understand, is the storm inside me. The pain that will follow me until I die. Love like this doesn't end with life. He paused, shaking his head as if trying to chase away a dark thought. Camilo watched him closely. What were you thinking just now? Forget it, Soares answered. I have no plans. I'll accept my fate. And if I take this political nomination, it's only because I need something to drown the pain eating at my heart. Camilo didn't respond. He wasn't sure any of this would work for everyone. Could politics really cure a broken heart? Maybe not. But in Soares' case, something strange happened. It actually helped. The campaign became his medicine, and slowly, the pain began to ease. Camilo hadn't said a word to support Soares, but once he got involved, he worked hard for him. Leandro's father joined the effort too, and in the end, they managed to include Leandro's name on a candidate list for the next election campaign. His rivals, knowing how he had received this chance, couldn't resist saying in every way possible that he had sold his birthright for a bowl of lentils. It had already been a year since the commissioner's son got married when a French traveler arrived at his farm. The man carried letters of recommendation from one of Camilo's old professors in Paris. Camilo welcomed him warmly and asked for news about France, which he still claimed to love as his intellectual homeland. The traveler shared many stories, and finally pulled a bundle of newspapers from his bag. It was Le Figaro. The Figaro, Camilo exclaimed, grabbing the papers eagerly. They were old issues, but they were from Paris. They reminded him of the life he had lived there for so many years. Though he didn't wish to trade his current life for that one, he still felt a natural curiosity to revisit those memories. When he opened the fourth or fifth newspaper, he came across a piece that shocked him. It read, "A certain Madame Leontina Cavot, who claimed to be the widow of a Prince Alexis, a subject of the Tsar, was arrested yesterday. This beautiful woman, and she truly was beautiful, had not only fooled some young men but also stolen all the jewelry of her neighbor. Mademoiselle B, the victim, complained just in time to stop the fake princess from escaping." Camilo had just finished reading the story for the fourth time when Isabel walked into the room. "Are you missing Paris?" she asked, seeing how focused he was on the French paper. "No," he replied, putting his arm around her waist. "I was missing you."
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.